Gemini Man leaves the possibility of a sequel open. But will it happen? Could we see Will Smith playing both versions of himself again soon? Ang Lee's latest Gemini Man appears to have fallen from grace, with the film initially being one of the most anticipated films of the year, even part of a couple experts' Oscar predictions earlier on. All because the man helming the film has previously won the Oscar on 2 occasions, both for seminal works in the history of cinema itself. The fact that Gemini Man only has a 29% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes is regrettable, given that some reviewers have praised the movie's visuals while mocking its plot. Gemini Man, for all intents and purposes, was a box office failure, despite its technological advances. A total of $173.2 million was made worldwide, including $48.5 million from the United States and Canada, and $124.6 million from other countries. Gemini Man is about an aging elite assassin hired by the US government to eliminate high-profile threats to the country. When he decides to retire, his final kill reveals that the organization giving him contracts has been fabricating data on its victims and using him to carry out their orders, eliminating suspects connected to the Gemini program, a top-secret Black Ops division led by Clive Owen. The agency goes after him, knowing that Brogan was aware of the secret now, and after a failed attempt, decides to send in their most skilled killer, who turns out to be Henry's clone, a product of the Gemini program. Henry's clone is able to initially overcome him due to his ferocity, and appears to be able to predict Henry's moves. The rest of the movie's plot revolves around how Henry and his clone even the playing field in their competition with one another, and defeat Clay Verris's attempt to use the Gemini program to create an army of clones. Gemini Man appears to be a massive action blockbuster on the outside, but you might be surprised to learn that there's a lot to unpack beneath the movie's premise of a hitman going up against a younger version of himself. It is especially important to analyze the movie's ending and how it ties into the whole thing, because it has a lot to say about what makes us human, and even what might make someone a particularly skilled murderer. However, Lee has left the possibility of a sequel open, in which Will Smith, or anyone else for that matter, could return. In all honesty, Gemini Man does not need a sequel. The ethics of cloning and killing are pretty thoroughly explored in director Ang Lee's singular film, not to mention that the plot of Henry Brogan's long, dark night of the soul, as told through his encounter with his younger self, pretty much comes full circle. We don't need to see any more clones or government plots tormenting Henry or Jr., and the humorous note of the joyous life the movie ends on is sufficient to put an end to it. Gemini Man is without a doubt the movie that has taught us the most about not having to recreate every experience in life. After Ang Lee and Will Smith joined the project in April 2017, they were able to put together a cast, complete the film's production, and deliver the finished product in about 2.5 years. Before we go any further, we wanted to let you know that it's time for you to smash that like button if you haven't done it already! While some of the key cast members have already been confirmed, the majority of the development time on Gemini Man 2 will be spent on story development. The best-case scenario, assuming Lee were to return to directing, is therefore for the film to be released in late 2022. Given the fact that 2022 is almost over and Gemini Man 2 hasn't been announced as of yet, if it doesn't happen, it won't likely debut until 2023 or 2024. If Gemini Man 2 does happen, we must ask, is Will Smith going to reprise his role as Henry Brogan? In a dual-role performance, Will Smith plays a younger version of himself as well as a top government assassin who comes face-to-face with his younger self, who is out to kill his older self and take his place. The role of Clay Verris, who also created Junior for the Gemini program, is played by Clive Owen, who we also look forward to seeing again. In addition to Will and Clive, Benedict Wong, who portrayed Harry's co-worker Baron in the movie, and Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Danielle, Danny Zakariewski would be welcome additions to the cast's stunning team. As Jack Willis, Douglas Hodge might also rejoin them. Aside from those 5, there are no additional cast members from the first film set to return. It's still early, so maybe their involvement is just being hidden from the public. Ang Lee, however, did not intend for the movie to be part of a larger universe, since there are no post-credit scenes, no hints of unexplored subplots in the film, or anything to look forward to in a potential next film, all of which neatly close in on the movie's conclusion. But there is always a chance of a new story. As we saw throughout the entirety of Gemini Man, the US government was willing to go to great lengths to remove Henry Brogan from service. And if he couldn't trust them to allow him to retire in peace, how in the world can he believe their official statement that Gemini has been dismantled and that there are no clones left to speak of? That leads to the presence of another clone of Will Smith's Henry still running around out there as the initial path towards the hypothetical Gemini Man 2. Or there's another direction a potential sequel could take, with Junior's very existence posing a threat to the administration that authorized the program in the first place. This means that instead of the mystery surrounding Gemini Man's cloning, the plot would now revolve around a race against time to avoid a typical hit squad and safely hide the young clone away. Gemini Man 2 could draw from a number of threads to wrap up a compelling story. Gemini didn't just make one copy of Henry, as revealed toward the end of the movie. Their leader, Clay, made a third member of the group who had no sense of pain or emotion, making him a skilled assassin and nearly ideal soldier. Junior even asks Clay how many other versions of himself exist, but Clay does not definitively say that he does not have other clones, only that there is no one else like Junior because he raised him as a son. Gemini Man 2 could easily reveal that another version of Henry exists and is now free, bringing Henry and Junior back together to take him down. Even if the ending does not explicitly state it, we do have the agency's chief assuring Henry Brogan that all processes and labs associated with the Gemini program had been destroyed, albeit only verbally, and Clay Verris's fate remains unknown. That is something worth exploring. The sequel could go in a number of directions, most of which would primarily involve more Gemini men, as in the third act of the film, even if the chances of that happening were slim. We certainly have the technology to further de-age Will Smith, and this film excels in that regard, as well as in all of its other visual aspects. So, as this movie hinted in its closing moments, the idea of a future Gemini Man movie featuring a super soldier who is a clone of Henry Brogan and is heartless and without conscience doesn't seem all that absurd. And because of this, you need to smash that subscribe button and notification bell so you'll never miss any of our videos in the future. The only variables that appear to be impeding, if not preventing it from happening, are its currently derided critical reception, which is bound to hurt how well this film does over its lifetime, even if its leading star may ensure footfalls in the opening weekend, and Lee's involvement himself, given Lee's preference for new projects over sequels and fictional universes. Let's just hope Lee has a change of heart and gives us the eagerly anticipated sequel. See you in the next video!